Today we're going to be looking at the 2017 December Gold question, Haybale Feast. So in this question, Farmer John is preparing a meal for his cows, and so he's going to have a list of consecutive hay bales, and each one is going to have a spiciness level and a flavor level. So the cows, like me, don't like spicy, so what's going to happen is Farmer John wants to find the minimum spiciness his meal could achieve if his meal needs to have a total flavor of at least M. So we're going to have N and M, we're going to read in the input, and we want to output the minimum amount of spiciness that satisfies the flavors. So in solving this question, the first most obvious algorithm to use would just be to brute force. So what that would look like is I would go through and I would have, say, a triple for loop, and I would find every possible range and check A, whether or not it was valid, and B, the minimum spiciness or the spiciness of that range. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to use that idea and we're going to optimize it. So what we're going to do is we are still going to find ranges and we're still going to find the spiciness of every range, but what we're going to do is we're going to limit the number of ranges that we use by using 2 pointers. So let's take this example right here. What we're going to do is we're going to have the first for loop be for R. So let's say we have 2 pointers L and R, left and right. And then the left is going to be the start, and the right is going to be the end. So for our code, we're going to have something like for R, and then R is going to loop through from the beginning to the end. And let's say R is here. So what we would do is we would say, okay, well, the current range I'm testing, I'm going to cut it off here. So what we're going to do then is we're just going to go through, and we're basically going to have a second variable L. So we're going to start L at 0. And what we're basically going to do is we're going to continuously increment until we reach a point where the flavor is no longer possible. So what this means is, since they both start at the first value, we're going to continuously increment L until this range between L and R no longer has enough flavor. And if we were brute forcing, what we would do is we would basically have our L, and we're going to use 2 pointers, which means we're not going to have another L in here. We're going to have L here, and every time we move R, we're going to keep L at its original value. But in addition to that, what we're going to do is we're actually going to keep a set. And not just a set, we're going to keep a multi-set. So what we're going to do is we're going to have L and R, say they're right here. And every time we increment L, what we're actually going to do is we're going to have this multi-set on hand, and it's going to contain all of the spiciness values so far. So let's simulate this through. Let's say our flavor minimum is going to be 5. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start both pointers here. And then let's actually have our L be green and our R be blue. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to increment my R, and I'm basically going to move it here. And then over here, our flavor is going to be 4. And when we move it, our spicy currently contains 2 and 5. And then so we're going to move it again. And then we see over here, okay, well, our flavor is 6, which is enough. And right now, this current set, multi-set, it's going to contain 2, 4, and 5. So then what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, well, the current maximum spiciness is going to be 5, which means the spiciness of this meal here is 5. And then we're going to take the minimum of that in like our variable. And then what we're going to do is we're going to increment our left pointer. And then let's say over here, we increment it. When we increment, we're just going to use .find. And since this right here is a set, .find isn't going to be that expensive. So we're going to take our multi-set, and then we're just going to find the spiciness value here. We're going to erase it, and then let's pretend this range was valid. If this range was valid, I'd find the maximum spiciness again. So it's a pretty simple algorithm. We're just going to loop through, we're going to use 2 pointers, and then we're going to have our multi-set on hand with the spiciness values. So let's go look at the code for this question. So I've set up the code a bit here. We have type def long as LL, so all that means is that when I use LL in my code, it's just going to mean long. I've also defined f and s as first and second, so anytime you see .f or .s, it just means .first or .second. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to read in our input, and I'm going to read it into my vector of pairs, bales. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the 2 pointers. So I'm going to have one main variable here. It's going to be CF or current flavor, and it's just going to store the current flavor of my range. And then I'm going to have a multiset spicy. And the reason we're going to be using a multiset is because let's assume we have 2 bales with the same amount of spiciness. So if I were to use a normal set, I would remove both bales. So in order to prevent from that, we're going to use a multiset. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to loop through our right pointer. So we're going to start from 0 and then go to n. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add the flavor of the bale to our current flavor, and we're going to insert the spiciness level to my spicy multiset. So now that that's set up, what we're going to do is we're going to have a while loop, and this is pretty much the bulk of the code. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a while loop, and it's going to say while our current flavor is greater than or equal to m, which basically means while this current meal is valid, what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable called CS, and this is just going to be current spicy or the spiciness level of the range. And what I've done here is, as you can see, the multiset has a greater. So when I do spicy.begin and I grab the iterator, it just means I'm grabbing the biggest value from the spicy multiset. So I'm going to have this value, and I'm going to do the minimum of the value in my current answer to find my answer. And then I'm going to update it, so I'm going to subtract. So right now I'm going to assume that I'm removing the value at the L pointer, so I'm going to subtract its flavor from current flavor, and I'm also going to erase its value from spicy. So in order to erase the value, I'm going to do .find and then erase. And right here is the reason why we are going to use a multiset. And then over here we're going to increment L, and it's just going to keep running until I find an invalid range. And then at the very end, we're just going to return our answer. And that's the end of our program.